Climate Conversation with Quamrul Chowdhury, Climate Actions Pathways, episode 15. Today, we are pleased to have an anonymous panel. Our resource persons, our panelists include Bangladesh Permanent Foreign Secretary, Masud bin Momen, Bangladesh Climate Change Negotiation Team Leader, Dr. Qazi Kholiquzzaman Ahmad, and a very distinguished panel. Welcome you all to the Climate Summit. Today, we are going to discuss in this conversation the outcome of Petersburg Dialogue, Climate Dialogue, which has been held since 1995. And day before yesterday, we had this dialogue convened by the co-presidency and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Virtually, of course. This was the 12th episode, 12th in number, to galvanize the momentum we have generated so far to advance the work for COP26 in Glasgow come November. Whatever the outcome, some say there are some advancements, some say they are not happy, they are frustrated because some of the statements made by some of the world leaders didn't match the ambition we require to keep the momentum. We require to keep alive 1.5 degree Paris Agreement target alive. So what are the challenges before us for virtual subsidiary bodies meeting from 31st of May to 17th of June, again virtually, for preparing the work for Conference of the Parties in its 26th edition in Glasgow come November. There are ups and downs. We have already seen on Earth Day, April 22nd and 23rd, US President Joe Biden not only returned to the Paris Agreement, but also convened 40 world leaders climate summit. There are also some of the countries, some of the big emitters made some commitment, especially to raise their ambitions. But scientists say this ambition raising is yet far from matching the 1.5 degree temperature rise goal to keep alive. We need to raise our ambitions, all countries, especially the big emitters, need substantial ambition raising and also raising their finance commitment. They have committed in Copenhagen, in Cancun, then onwards to raise every year $100 billion and from 2020. But we are yet to reach that goal also. We also demanded that adaptation and mitigation finance should be balanced. That goal is yet to be reached. So we have a lot of work, especially Paris Agreement, Article 6, market mechanism, non-market mechanism, carbon pricing, carbon trading, all those issues and rule book. There are a lot of unfinished agendas. Those we need to sort out in June SBI sessions. So how far we are faring in doing our work, the climate negotiators, are we faring, are we up to the expectations of the global community, the mankind, the planet? So without much ado, I would now like to request Dr. Qazi Kholiquzzaman Ahmad to initiate the conversation. Especially, he has been not only a climate scientist, an economist, and led Bangladesh negotiation team for quite some time. So, Kholiq bhai.
Thank you, Quamrul. I was not expecting to be the first to come, but let me make some comments. We have been attending webinars for quite some time on various aspects of climate change negotiations and as well as management, negotiations for management. As you mentioned, 1.5 degree. We are already at 1.22 degrees. What the Earth has warmed by 1.2 degrees already. Now 0.3 degree. So that's a very small difference, and we are aiming at that. And still, I believe that we should keep that alive. Although in Paris we have said well below 2 degrees, and if possible 1.5 degree. But even at this 1.2 degree or 1.1 degree, whatever is the exact figure, I have seen both 1.1 and 1.2. The world is in a clumsy situation right now already, and it is an existential issue. We know COVID may be controlled in 2 years or 3 years' time, but this is something that's eroding our resources, eroding our planetary resources and so on. And therefore, not only the climate vulnerable countries, but all the countries, including the developed countries, are facing problems and will be increasingly facing problems. Although the climate vulnerable countries like Bangladesh are in more precarious situation. Now, on the ambition, in the Biden conference and the other conferences, the countries which are most polluting, they are making some offers, but this may not, from yours and mine, long negotiating experience. Whatever they have said, when we go to Glasgow, they may not even keep that. It may be something else. But we need to see that much more ambitious plan to mitigate. And I have seen one scientific finding that unless we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 8 to 9% per year for the next 10 years, we won't be able to save the Earth, let alone 1.5 degree by the end of the year. And on the Biden conference, we heard people make commitments, not commitments, they're saying that they will do certain things, but they may not do. Even if they do what they have said they might, I don't think we're going to get the situation under control. So that's where we have to do much more work. That's the number one point. And we must remember that this is an existential issue for the humanity and for the Earth itself. And from that point of view, everyone should come together, particularly the political leaders from around the world. Actually, they make the decisions in the ultimate analysis. Now, the second issue that I'd like to talk about is the financing. Financing, 50% for adaptation, 50% for mitigation. We have been saying for a long time, and we have been saying it has to be no loan for climate financing. It has to be grant, but the rules have changed now. In GCF, either it's co-financing or it's loan. And here the more important question to me is the time taken in approving a project or rejecting. It takes years and years, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Some people say that developing countries like Bangladesh do not have the capacity to prepare projects very well. But that's not true. We have submitted very good projects because Polli Karmashayak Foundation, of which I'm the chairman, is a national entity, and IDCOL is the other one. There are two organizations which can receive money directly from GCF. We have submitted very good projects, but then it takes years, 2 years, 3 years, 100 questions, then another 100 questions, and so on. This process, if it continues, I don't think people will get money in time to be able to control their situation, and the impact is worsening and worsening and worsening. The third issue that I'd like to raise is very important, and that is the displaced people, displacement, climate change displacement. We have been talking about loss and damage, but I'm not very hopeful because the developed countries don't want to hear about compensation, and therefore I think this is not going very much anywhere. So it's the people who are displaced. I think we should focus on adaptation and on displacement as much as we can, so that our immediate problems can be addressed, and until of course we control the warming, we will go down anyway. The whole world will go down.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop here.
Yeah. Thank you, Kholiq Bhai, for setting the tone. I would now like to request Felipe Diaz from Chile. You are from the host country. This presidency is still in Chile. So what is your expectation? How you are moving things so that we can crack the hard nerves, the ballpark issues, especially Article 6 and rule book, unfinished work of the rule book, raise the climate finance, and also raise the issue of loss and damage. What's the international mechanism? How it can we can make it effective one? Santiago network. How can we also strengthen it? So these are the, and also net zero, how to approach it, how to crack that, so that we can move forward. We can keep 1.5 degree temperature rise goal alive. Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Quamrul. Thank you for the invitation. And I would like to start with the following a little bit what Mr. Qazi was saying on adaptation and the problem on mobilization of people. I think this is very important. This is something that we have and we need to take in consideration. Our minister, Miss Carolina Schmidt, during the Petersburg Dialogue, she was very highlighting the point that adaptation is a vital part of the Paris Agreement that needs to have more importance than the one that we have had until now. We need a more balanced agenda, and we must also recognize that the global goal of adaptation is a fundamental element of the Paris Agreement. So this is the first point that I want to make, because we as a developing and vulnerable country, we need to increase our actions in a global level, in a local level on adaptation. Secondly, on my expectation for the COP26 and all the work that we need to have in all the agenda items. Particularly, I follow transparency, the Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, and from there I can speak a little bit more extensively. But from what I have seen in other items and in this particular one, there are three things that we need to consider. The technical matter, that we all recognize that there are still many things that need to be agreed and work to be done during the next 6 months, and we all parties recognize that this work needs to be done. We need more space. We need to find new solutions to work in a virtual manner, and then it comes the second issue that is very important, which is the procedural matter. How we are going to keep going forward, how we are going to capture all this discussion, because we cannot keep discussing the same item, the same discussion, giving the same position every time we get together. We need to advance, and for that, the procedural needs to be defined we have to have an agreement to keep going forward. And from what we have heard from the head of delegations dialogue, we have had from the presidencies with all parties, and then with some discussion we had with coming from the SAFSTA, the SB, the SAFSTA and the SBI share. We understand that all head of delegations understand this topic, and they have made commitments to keep following and the advance on the all the agenda items in parallel. And from there, we need to keep. We as negotiators and each agenda items, we know we need to keep advancing, and we need to find ways that when we get to Glasgow or to any negotiation instance, we will have at our hands some documents, some ideas, some more clear things that we have now that will help us to resolve these issues at that point. Okay. Just to give a small glimpse, on response measures and the Santiago network, this is particularly not one item that I follow, but from what I discussed with my colleagues, I know how much work we are giving it from the presidencies. And I think that during this year, there are gonna be some virtual instances and other kind of work that has been done with the upcoming presidency. So I expect to have an advance also in the Santiago network.
Okay, thank you for reflecting on behalf of the host, on behalf of the co-presidency, current presidency. I would now like to go to my friend from Zambia. Ephraim, are you here?
Yes, I am.
From
Thank
Africa.
you.
Yeah.
Sure,
What is your take?
Yes.
What is your expectation? No, how will you read the Petersburg Dialogue? Arend? And what is your expectation?
Thank you. Indeed, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's good to see everyone. I think my expectation is that we have a lot of work in Glasgow, and probably it needs to be business unusual and not the usual way that we negotiate. Yes, we are having the SBs at the month end going up to the mid of June, but unless I'm mistaken, the position has been that yes, we can make progress, we can advance, but we will not make decisions. The decisions will only have to be made when we meet physically in Glasgow, everything being equal. What that means is that in Glasgow, there will be quite a lot of work to be done. We will not have draft decisions to be adopted because we are not having negotiating text. It's only progress that will have been. That entails that a lot of work in Glasgow will be required to move quite quickly to ensure that we can reach a tangible outcome at the end of the conference. So my concern is more about procedural issues. Yes, we may have a number of outstanding issues like Article 6, where we need to reach consensus and ensure that we can have the rule book agreed. But if we get bogged down in procedural issues like we normally do, it will be very difficult in Glasgow to cover all the work streams that are required for a good outcome at the end. So it is the procedural issues that we need to ensure that they are taken care of quickly enough to ensure that we move beyond just the advancing of work that we do at the SPs, but quickly have drafted decisions in negotiating text where we can quickly make decisions. But I'm hopeful that we've learned our lessons. We should be able to make progress in Glasgow.
Okay. I would now like to move to Professor Leibo from United States. Leibo.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
first of
my
all,
friend.
for inviting me. This actually is special for me. I'm a professor in the United States, and for years, the best students I've ever had were from Bangladesh, women
Yeah.
students from Bangladesh.
Yes.
Let me apologize. I'm going to speak, we all have a different background. And
Yeah.
I'm going to speak from the perspective of a professor of international politics, modern world politics from the United States. And from my perspective, and we're talking about the Petersburg Dialogue and what's going on with Glasgow, is that the single most important thing is the sense of excitement about the entire context of the era we're moving into. I mean, we have to be realistic. Most of us have spent years dealing, literally, going back to Rio and everything else, trying to get the world to take on climate change. And we finally, after so many failures, after Copenhagen and everything else, we ended up with Paris, and we finally grabbed as Americans say, sort of grabbed the ring, and then we stumbled because my country, and for good or bad, you all know how influential the United States is, stumbled and elected almost immediately after the euphoria of Paris, Donald Trump, who not only slowed the process, but dramatically did everything he could to go backwards. And then, so basically, and to be perfectly blunt, I have spent years working on climate, but the most important climate work in the last 4 years was defeating Donald Trump. And now what we've arrived at is not just the removal of someone who's trying to take us backwards, but with the arrival of Biden, and we had Clinton and we had Obama, all of whom were very committed. But the significance of having Joe Biden coming into power, not just they're getting rid of Trump, but with this phenomenal all government commitment to climate and a willingness, quite frankly, on a kind of a personality, psychological level, to put someone forward who has that level of, the old Latin word auctoritas, that kind of authority, separate from the presidency of John Kerry as being the primary spokesperson. I mean, a great many presidents would not have the comfort level psychologically to put someone like that with that level of authority in power, just because of the politics of the thing. So from my perspective, we enter this arena with an incredible sense of finally allowing Paris to fulfill the momentum it was supposed to be. I mean, I can go on, there's a number of different issues, but I think that's singly the most important issue as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Simon Leibo, my friend, for putting the right perspective. Thank you very much. I would now like to request Batu Uprety from Nepal, the Asian perspective, the Asian drama, the Asian problem, the mountain problem, where it is. Batu.
Thank you, Quamrul, and thank you very much to see you in the organizing this program. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to raise few issues that how this 1.5 degrees Celsius target will be met. It's really very difficult. That based on the many countries, as you know, I submitted their updated NDC or the second NDC, whatever they say it. There are a lot of conditional targets. When we put the conditional conditions, that is subject to the availability of funding and technology. So, and the many countries have also declared themselves that they will be a carbon neutral by 2050. Ultimately, either we like or not, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emission to meet our global target, and also to reduce the temperature by sufficiently below the 2 degree Celsius. So, so the important thing at this point of time in Glasgow or any international climate change event is there is a good signal on commitment, including the in the leader summit on climate. US has also made very good commitment. How this commitment will be translated into action. Unless they are implemented, it is really difficult to achieve our targets. That is, I want to raise, so how those commitments will be translated into action. And because we need technology and finance, which the developing countries and particularly the least developed countries face difficulty. The second issue I want to raise at this point of time is, how the climate change issues will be addressed during the current COVID pandemic. It is because it is again many countries are facing difficulties, particularly to feed their people. My country
and also green
pandemic
recovery.
is,
Green recovery and
really dangerous. How climate change mitigation or adaptation issue will get priority, necessary priority. I don't want to say the maximum, at least necessary priority during the current situation. If it continues to.
Okay. Thank you. I'll come back to you again.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Arend, Janssen. Professor Arend.
Thank you. I'm not a professor yet, but thank you very much for inviting me. So I think some ideas from my side. I like the emphasis on infrastructure investment and preparation of good investments, really to bring in the private sector. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to really implement the commitments made by countries. And I think also I heard about the carbon markets. Hopefully we can move forward with that. I think the EU made a big commitment already on buildings and transport. And I think these kind of developments are very interesting. And otherwise, the private sector, I think global banks and asset owners and asset managers could really work on setting new standards for their investments, so that the investments are really going to the right projects. Also, implementing new policies. I think private sector should really be involved to get the right money to where it's needed. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll come back to you again. Okay, Cookie, my friend. Cookie from Indonesia. What is your reflection?
Thank you.
Friend.
I think since I'm not following the negotiation any longer, I mean since Madrid. But anyway, on the process, I think
there was no negotiation after Madrid. There was no negotiation after Madrid.
That's right. That's right. No, so but I think what happened, leading to Glasgow, I agree with what Felipe and also the other speakers already mentioned on the process, right? It is a big challenge, and we know that we have a big homework in front of us. But unfortunately, there is no way that we can negotiate through this online conversation like this. I cannot imagine how we're going to do that. But anyway, there are a number of issues that I do agree we need to have a decision. Like, for example, the Article 6. I think the issue with Article 6, because we already heard also that a number of countries already, put their net zero emission target. And if you look at their net zero emission plan, it's basically, most of the developed countries say that they're gonna reduce their emission up to 95% of their 1990 emission. But then, to make it a net zero, then they're gonna have sequestration and also international markets, right? So I think we need to have a clear rules for the international market because of that, at least. And also there are already, sorry, a number of initiatives, like for example, we have heard about this carbon border adjustment mechanism, for example, from the EU. I think this will raise another issue from developing countries and exporter countries, especially the one that export things to Europe, because we are talking about unilateralism versus multilateralism, for example. And I think we need to, even though it's like beyond the negotiation itself, there are a lot of things that need to be done for, on the one hand, for the good or to achieve, sorry, the target of a number of countries that quite ambitious, but on the other hand, it will also, if I can say, give additional burden to some of the developing countries. So this is also something that we need to work together to make sure that, we're gonna deal with this issue with climate within the multilateralism rather than unilateralism. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. All our hands should be full on that day. Kuki, you are right. So I would now like to ask Ziaul Haq from Bangladesh. Zia, how do you foresee? Yeah.
I wish to speak after our respected Foreign Secretary can deliver.
No. You will get another chance, so don't worry. Very briefly.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. And I see many known faces, including my LDC colleagues, Ephraim and Batu. In fact, you raised a question whether what is the expectation from the Petersburg Dialogue. In fact, we see the Petersburg Dialogue as a part of sincere political effort to carry forward the very positive momentum that was created by the Leaders Summit convened by the President Biden. And I feel that this expectation from the Petersburg Dialogue has been met, and they have actually the leaders, particularly the head of the delegation, the honorable ministers, and respected secretaries, they have talked about the relevant issues, very crunching issues of negotiations that will be taken up by the COP16 and CME3. So in that case, I feel that the Petersburg Dialogue has been a success. But in fact, we all know that in any multilateral process, if we want to desire to achieve a meaningful, fruitful outcome, the mutual trust and confidence among the parties is fundamental. So we have to build the mutual trust and confidence among the country parties. And we have seen that after 2016, this trust, mutual trust and confidence has been eroded to some extent. And we have to regain this trust among the parties that we are working together in the spirit of Paris Agreement and as well as the international solidarity that we have put on climate change issues. And I also feel that since Ephraim has rightfully pointed out that there will be no decisions during SB's consultation, almost.
It will be informal. It will be informal.
It will be informal consultation, but there will be no decision.
Yeah.
But
No decision,
that,
no conclusion.
we will be talking about that negotiating text and we will be talking about the agenda items that will be put forward to the COP. But how can we capture the progress of the discussions? There will be no
that is a
vehicle,
challenge.
there
That
will
is
be
a
no
challenge.
vehicle of capturing the progress that we will be making in the during the SB sessions. No, informal.
No,
no
those will
informal
be shared summary. Those will be
no,
shared summaries.
even no chair summary, no informal note, no conference paper, no L document, nothing. So I feel that there will be a huge burden on the part of negotiators to complete the process within just 2 weeks in November. Only 2 weeks in November. It will be
but in
huge
September
challenge.
there will be one. In September there will be another one.
But it
Don't
has to
worry.
be, but it has to be in person. Actually, some of the parties, country parties, they are very eloquent on the issue that without in-person negotiations, there will be no decisions whatsoever. So
we are
case,
hoping for the best. We are hoping for the best.
We are stuck.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
but
Thank you. I am coming back to you again. Andrea. Andrea Santos from Brazil. My friend, Andrea, you are very sick, I know, but still you have joined. Andrea.
So,
can you?
Thank you, Quamrul.
Andrea.
Can you hear?
Can
you hear me?
We hear you. We hear you.
So I know that I'm in the end of the meeting, but you'd like to say something regarding the expectation about the COP26. So I think, Kamal, we have a key question that we need to think how to solve at COP26. So especially regarding the Article 6, the use of carbon market, I think it's a key component of the majority of national climate plans to deliver the reductions in emissions. Also, we should double counting be avoided. It's important to consider this. And of course, I think we need to think how to attract the global finance climate, how to attract the global climate finance. So it's important also to think about how to act, especially all countries, and agree to limit the greenhouse gas emission net zero. So this is my points that I'd like to contribute. And especially we are worried about the advance regarding Article 6. So I'm sorry that I'm just in the end of the meeting, but thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Rashed Mahmud Titumir.
Thank you.
Rashed,
Thank you, Mr. Quamrul Chowdhury. I was listening to the negotiator. I'm not a negotiator, so I would just reflect on what, as a general public, I think of what could be an expectation out of COP26 process. So while there are stronger climate goals by a number of countries is a welcome signal, yet the leaders' climate summit was a missed opportunity. The overall approach from heads of state was underwhelming, particularly as the promised target had fewer clear policies and lacked the necessary international finance and technology transfers, particularly for civilians. And then the new climate targets announced by the US and other rich nations in recent weeks have put the world on track for global heating of about 2.4 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. Some heavy emitters such as China, India, South Korea, New Zealand, Turkey, Saudi Arabia are also among the scores of countries still to submit NDCs. The NDC 2, as mentioned earlier, is full of subject to conditions. Last Thursday's climate meeting in Berlin, the Petersburg Dialogue, was supposedly supposedly to announce new cash for developing countries. That was a disappointment. We can only hope this G7, which meets next month in Cornwall in UK, will try to extract promises of at least simply meeting the existing commitments on climate finance, that long overdue $100 billion a year target. I would now move to another issue which has not been touched now until now. In order to arrest the escalating climate crisis, the world needs an urgent and just transition from fossil fuels to renewable. Unfortunately, an energy transition is happening far too slowly. The world is currently on track to produce 120% more fossil fuels by 2030 than is compatible with a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. Thus, if such continues, we are to miss the Paris Climate Agreement goal. Annual investment in wind and solar capacity need to reach about, according to Sam Smith, $750 billion, which requires a tripling of current investment levels. Most disturbingly, besides succumbing to voluntary NDCs, the Paris Agreement has no mention of oil, gas, or coal. Meanwhile, the fossil fuel industry continues to plan new projects. Currently, the global demand for are all growing, with fossil fuels accounting for about 81% of energy shift. And if you really look at the big banks and also the multilateral banks are continuing to invest in fossil fuel. So what we need a treaty on non-proliferation of fossil fuels. I will stop here.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Millar, congratulations, you have won in the election in UK.
Thank you, Mr. Quamrul.
You are upbeat, yeah. So everything is now rest on you. How you foresee, how you feed the oil to Glasgow?
So I was fascinated to hear Dial's comments about Petersburg and that he saw it as a good step forward. I think most of the reporting, certainly in Europe, has been that it did not go well, and the perception is disappointment, and the finance commitments were underwhelming. I think people were hoping, expecting Chancellor Merkel to come with something, and clearly that didn't happen. So it's interesting to see what will happen at the G7, and certainly from a UK perspective, it would be nice to see some focus from the whole of government in the UK, and reflecting on what Professor Stephen Leibo was saying about, you know, how impressive the whole of the US government effort is, and appointing someone of Kerry's stature. I don't believe that we're seeing that level of commitment across the whole government from the UK in the same way that we saw it from the French government and their diplomatic effort in the lead up to COP21. So perhaps the expectation is that once we have a bit of focus on the G7, and we're sort of 6 months away, that perhaps we'll see a little bit more of that. But up until now, it's been rather underwhelming. And Quamrul, we have had these conversations that we can't have the trust and confidence building, you know, with other countries if we're not seeing that highest level commitment coming from the UK Prime Minister, coming from the Foreign Secretary, showing that level of peer-to-peer collaboration and respect that goes a long way in that diplomatic effort to rebuilding trust and reflecting on what other people said about 2016. We have a long way to come back from those levels of trust, and will we do that in 6 months in time for Glasgow? I think it's a tall order.
No, it is. You see, Shara, everything now depends on Boris Johnson and also Olof, because if you remember in 2008 and 2009, in the run-up to Copenhagen, we had a lot of meetings, especially by Gordon Brown. Even he asked me to help him to crystallize Ed Miliband, David Miliband. They were instrumental in raising the ambition, raising the climate finance, even Green Climate Fund. If there was no Gordon Brown, there was no Green Climate Fund at that point of time of history, because he has personally requested Barack Obama, US President, at that point of time, in my presence, to have a Green Climate Fund and mobilize at least $100 billion. So that was crystallized because of Gordon Brown, Ed Miliband, David Miliband, and also, say, Barack Obama. Those people are responsible. So this time also they need to, say, put all their hands on the deck. Otherwise, it will be a Herculean task. Yeah, Chara. So thank you. I will come back to you again. I would now request Bangladesh Permanent Foreign Secretary Masud bin Momen. Masud bin Momen, our Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Quamrul, for inviting us or inviting me to this climate channel, climate conversation episode 15. Dr. Qazi Kholiquzzaman Ahmad, our respected climate negotiator, chief negotiator, and dear friends from across the globe, and also Sarah Miller's curious cat. So no, I mean we had a good conversation so far. I think the world has witnessed a very refreshing change in the last few months, as the professor from the United States mentioned, that the global politics or geopolitics will have a refreshing change with the new administration in the US. And although there were no great results from the leaders summit convened by the Biden administration, but I think it set the right kind of tone, especially even if we see President Bolsonaro's statement, when the world leader leads, then many automatically adjust or change their tune. Like when President Trump was there, we saw many followers in other countries who were also hiding or trying to hide behind nationalistic shield. So in that sense, we have a good beginning, and Bangladesh, already mentioned by Dr. Qazi Kholiquzzaman, what are our priorities or some of the issues that are very close to Bangladesh, including the finance part and balance that we have been demanding between adaptation and mitigation. And also, I would emphasize on the technology transfer aspect of the climate change discussions. Bangladesh is now not only be asking for its own climate redressal mechanisms, but recently we have also become the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum of some 48 countries. And as the chair of this, although we'll not have any separate seat in Glasgow, but we will have some discourse or discussions in the sidelines, and there I would request all of you also to join our hands. And also we'll be the coordinator or the chair of the Vulnerable 20 Finance Ministers. So these two forums will have to also lead during the process leading to the Glasgow COP26. We know all the issues quite well here. I think all of the distinguished panelists and colleagues have been following these issues more closely than me. In Bangladesh, of course, we have, apart from the climate-induced displaced persons, or in some cases, climate refugees in the African continent or in other places, we are already seeing, visible concerns in our coastal areas. On the top of that, we are now hosting 1.1 million Rohingya refugees in a place called Cox's Bazar, which is also becoming very vulnerable climate-wise and also other socio-economic impact-wise. So therefore, Bangladesh was doing quite good in terms of economic development and growth rate. Under our present leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. However, no country can prosper alone. And we have seen during the COVID era how connected we are. Even if Bangladesh manages COVID well, but if the markets where our goods are exported or our development partners they are not doing well, then we cannot do well alone. So COVID has taught us that. My only fear is between now and Glasgow, we have about 6 months, and there will be a number of important meetings, including the G7 and maybe the G20 could also meet at some point of time. And unless we have some serious translation of the words and the commitments into actions, maybe we are not having any serious impact in itself, in Glasgow, in the 15 days as mentioned. Therefore, Bangladesh should be pushing for loss and damage, although Dr. Qazi Kholiquzzaman Ahmad has mentioned that not much would be expected, but as a kind of issue, we will try to continue to raise this. We'll also raise the technology transfer issue as mentioned, and also the climate resilience to have the 50-50 adaptation and mitigation, because Bangladesh does not have much in terms of on the mitigation front, but on adaptation front we have already done much. And very recently, many of you may or may not know that the climate South Asian Adaptation Center has been established in Bangladesh, where local solutions would be disseminated in other Asian countries or beyond Asia. So Bangladesh is doing whatever is possible, is necessary, even with our own resources from quite some time now. And if external financing is realized as promised, then well and good. Otherwise, we'll have to continue our own efforts. So I'll stop here, and maybe we can.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary Masud bin Momen. I will come back to you again for your last word. So I would now ask Felipe. Felipe Diaz, you know that we negotiators don't have much time. And for the first time in the history of climate negotiation, our negotiators will have to deliver things without much negotiation. Because in the first, we have at least 6 weeks of negotiations. At times, 12 weeks of negotiations to have a conference of parties decide on a matter, on an agenda item. But this time, we are going to get only, say, 3 weeks or maximum 4 weeks time, negotiating time. So it is a huge challenge. So as COP presidency right now, you are holding, how best you can fade that oil so that our negotiators have some time to negotiate, to crack things. Really?
Thank you again for the question. I think it's the question we have been having since 2020 when the COVID pandemic started, and we have been discussing this with the upcoming presidency as we have been working together during this time. And we have understood a couple of things. One of them is that, in fact, in the negotiation rooms, there are different kind of discussion. There are political discussion and technical discussion. And what we can do by now, that when we cannot have decisions, is that we can advance on the technical discussion. And in that way, we have had instances to discuss, to share our opinion. For example, the SACSTA share call for submissions that we can see in paper how other parties are thinking, the way they see the different items should look. So at least until now, we have had a technical discussion. We have had a technical exchange of views, and we will keep having those. So when we get to the negotiation rooms, we will have part of the work already done, and then there we will have this more political and more fine detailed technical discussion that we need to have to settle the final outcomes. So I think I have high expectation. I believe that when we get to Glasgow, we will have plenty of the job done. And there, of course, we will have a lot of things yet to do, but at least we will be more certain of the final things we need to cover.
Okay, thank you. But you need to come again tomorrow to share your reflection. I would now like to request Ephraim from Zambia, my friend. Very briefly. Ephraim.
Thank you very much. I think I don't have much to add, but maybe just to pick up from where Felipe has just ended in terms of the distinction between the technical and the political discussions. Usually, I think from experience, particularly in Copenhagen, you tend to believe that you are better off doing much of the technical work up front before you get to the political level. It's easier, so that only a few issues are actually handled at the political level. If we're going to have a situation where the bulk of the work is actually taken to the political level, it can have some unexpected outcomes, unfortunately. But of course, I think we don't have a lot of luxury of time, so it must be necessary to move that way. But of course, with a bit of caution that it's important, most of the work are resolved technically, so that only a few and selected issues with very clear options are tabled at the political level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Professor Stephen Leibo. You know, we had a lot of discussion, especially in Kyoto, before, say, crafting Kyoto Protocol. Al Gore was your leader of the delegation, and he asked us to make some flexibility, make some concessions in terms of legal regime of Kyoto Protocol. And we made, especially I fondly remember Ambassador Raul Estrada, who was chair of the Committee of the Whole. He asked me to follow him, and we entered into the room of Al Gore, and he asked us to make some concessions. We made that concessions, and that night we gathered the Kyoto Protocol. But again, Al Gore didn't. Al Gore didn't win. And he also made concessions in your US elections.
Well,
then
since you bring up
Bush came in, and you have withdrawn. So this time, Joe Biden, his term is for 4 years. After that, what will happen? again withdrawal from Paris Agreement?
Well,
So
let me, since
those
you bring up Al Gore,
Leibo.
and I've been working closely with Gore since 2007. When he came home, and I know this privately, when he came home from Kyoto, he presented the Kyoto treaties to the American Senate. Now divided between Republicans and Democrats, it did not matter. Only one senator was willing to support it. I reiterate the importance, and I know it's awkward and embarrassing, the influence of the United States. So let me bring in two things that are important as I think about it in the context of, I guess, the role I'm playing here right now. Glasgow is going to happen in November. Now, I was saying before, we've had two American Democratic administrations, Clinton and Obama, who were committed to dealing with climate, but more committed to having America catch up on healthcare. The Biden administration has been even more committed, this whole government role, the role of Kerry, in getting the U.S., and that is so important. So you all know the reasons why the U.S. role is so important. But I have two concerns. Glasgow is going to happen in November, the first week and a half of November. That turns out to be also going to be the next elections in the United States. They all fear, but there'll be a lot of them, state and government. What that means is that the Biden administration, so incredibly committed to climate, is going to have a referendum right in the middle of the Glasgow conference. And that plays out because, of course, the role of the US only is significant, putting aside our power technologically and the role we played in creating the problem, if we are consistent. And we know that we have not been consistent back and forth. So we have a referendum in the United States on the Biden administration in the middle of the conversation, Glasgow. I mean, I could go on to other things, but I think that's my contribution and something we have to be very aware of.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much, Professor Stephen Leibo. I would now like to request Batu. Batu, from the mountain. Your last word in a sentence.
How we can make the climate change people's agenda. I think how we can translate our political agenda into people's agenda, that might contribute a lot. Particularly, we need action, then commitment, and all these five things. So our focus as a least developed country and a mountainous country, our focus is on adaptation, as we don't emit. Our emission is negligible. So how we can save our poor people from climate change impacts? So let's try to make it people's agenda. Every person has, feels that climate change is our agenda, and we can implement actions that protect us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Professor Rashed Mahmud Titumir, what is your last word? Titumir.
For far too long, governments have lagged shockingly at political level behind what science demands and what a growing people in generally knows. So urgent action is needed to end the expansion of fossil fuel production, phase out current production, and invest in renewable energy with employment at the center of recovery out of COVID-19 pandemic. So in this regard, we need a global fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, and then, as others have mentioned, ensure long overdue finance, 50-50 divides for adaptation and mitigation. And what is most importantly needed is a political statementship, not a brinkmanship, what we have observed even in Copenhagen. So as an optimist, I look forward to a business unusual approach, which really is people's.
Okay, thank you. Cookie. my friend,
Yes. Yeah.
your last word.
Okay. I think we have a lot for sure, and
Yeah.
Two quick points. First, let's work hard to
Political
adaptation, mitigation, and means of
political agenda into people's agenda that might contribute a lot.
Yeah. Professor Rashed Mahmud Titumir, what is your last? Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Zia, cookie.
Other submention.
Technical issue without the clear direction from the political side, because that's
Yeah,
what
right.
happened.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Zia, cookie is depending on you.
Thank you. In fact,
very brief.
Yeah, we have to bear in mind that some issues are exhausted by the technical level negotiators, and some issues are depending on the political decisions. And in terms of long-term climate finance, the technical level the discussions has been exhausted. So in that case, we have to deal with the adaptation, mitigation, and means of implementation in a coherent and meaningful way, as proposed by many distinguished colleagues has rightly pointed out. And with regard to Article 6, this is very important. And in technical level negotiations, we are trying our best to come to an agreement. But the cookie has rightly pointed out that there has to be some political guidance to conclude our process. Otherwise, it will not conclude. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Because Article 6 depends on say how best we can have our NDCs, its transparency, its and also rule book, the rules of procedure, framing the rules, so that there is no double counting, there is a integrity of the system is there, and also say non-market mechanism like say carbon pricing, like say fiscal measures. Carbon tax, all those issues, those depend on political decision. Negotiators can hardly deliver that. Arend, my friend.
Thank you. I think, a lot has been said, and I think we should use every way to reach the climate goals. I think also it was mentioned before the role of trade. So like climate policy and trade, I think it will be discussed at the G7. And I think that could also be very interesting to see what happens there. And other areas, I think the private sector should play a big role. And adaptation finance also in that regard is interesting to see how that could be made attractive to private investors.
Okay. Andrea. Andrea. Andrea, are you hearing me?
So, Quamrul? Yeah, I would like to point to, I'm very concerned regarding the urgency to achieve some consensus, especially regarding technical issues. So I think the mainstream is the objective of net zero emissions and carbon neutrality by 2050. I think this is the basis for every action made by country. So this is my last comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for very precise, concise. Kholiq, your last word.
Three quick points. First, let's work hard to get the best result from Glasgow, but let us not raise our hopes too high, otherwise we might get frustrated as happened in Copenhagen. Let's work hard. Second, just mentioned that net zero by 50 is not going to be helpful. There should be a drastic cut by 2030. So that's one other thing we should negotiate. And the third point is private sector financing. We don't know how it's coming. there is some talk about climate financing by the private sector, but they will come where there is profit. Right? We know that,
Yes.
but they are not going to come and help us with our adaptation, and that is becoming serious. So therefore, we have to be negotiating there. I don't know, 50%. If 50% comes from private sector, but how it will come, how it will not. GCF is working, trying to. There was a webinar with GCF some time ago. I asked that question, and they said they were working with private sector, but I was not very clear how they are going to do that. So we have to insist. Of course, there is the COVID situation now. The UK has just cut their finance, development finance by 40% or something, from 0.7 to 0.5. And I don't know what the other countries are doing. Therefore, the finance is going to be critical. We may demand, but there may not be much forthcoming. In the earlier times, as we know, there have been promises made. And then afterwards, delivery was so let's keep our fingers crossed, work hard, don't hope too much.
Thank you, colleague. I would now like to, Sarah.
She is not there. She is not there.
Oh, not there. Okay. Then, Philip, your last word, because you have to move fast.
Yeah.
And
I can go. Of course, yeah. No, I would like to reply on the other comments. I think for sure political matters are important, and we saw this commitment in the Petersburg Dialogue and in the head of delegations dialogue that we have in each item. So I think that there is a point of view, a political point of view coming from the head of delegations and from the ministers of environment. So now that commitment needs to just go down to all the negotiators. So we have a clear call from our leaders to go forward with the negotiation.
Thank you, Philip. Professor Steve. Professor Steve Leibo, are you here?
All right, let me throw in one more.
Yeah, first, I would like to point it out that in Joe Biden climate leader summit, adaptation was on a very low key. Even adaptation was not mentioned. It was mentioned in the form of resilience building. Why you are so shy, Professor Steve Leibo?
Well,
aren't you going to raise the profile of adaptation?
Well, would you feel better?
Ask your president.
Can I defend myself? I am an international political commentator in the northeast part of the United States, and 2 days ago, I did a commentary, which would have had thousands of people listening to it, on what I call the new inconvenient truth, is that we simply waited too long.
Right.
An adaptation has to be absolutely parallel and every bit as important as mitigation. And I know some people think, and I've even heard Gore talk about this, that if we focus also on adaptation, it somehow undermines mitigation. We cannot do that. We have to do both, because that is the new inconvenient truth. We waited too long. You're absolutely right. Adaptation is fundamental.
Yeah, but mitigation is the best adaptation, and adaptation is other side of the coin of mitigation. So, but adaptation has limits.
Yeah, water rise
stops, loss and damage is started.
5 feet water rise.
Yeah,
no, totally agree with you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I would now like to request Bangladesh Permanent Foreign Secretary Masud bin Momen for your last words.
No, thank you. I think leading up to Glasgow, we have to build very effective, coalitions or partnerships not only with the civil society and the academia, but also with the private sector, because without private sector's involvement, I don't think we can achieve much, because most of the government funds which were intended for climate action may be forced to be diverted to COVID-related emergency actions. So that is something which is impending on us. So we hope that we can work together. And then we also know that COP26 is not the place to negotiate monetary matters. There are other forums, so we will have to continue to raise these issues in those relevant forums, whether it is IMF or World Bank or other multinational development financing mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It was a great pleasure to have you all. The very rich panel. I had a long conversation, though initially we had some technical difficulties, but you had bear with that. With this hope, we have to move forward, try to pave the way, try to help build momentum by involving our climate negotiators, our political masters, our academia, our civil society. We had some technical difficulties in this conversation. That's why our panel is with that. With this hope, we are going to move forward, try to pave the way, try to help build momentum by involving our climate negotiators, our political masters, our academia, our civil society people in this conversation. That's why our panel is diverse one. And tomorrow we had another panel, and that will also deal with this issue. We hope that in the run-up to Glasgow, we have a lot of parlays, we have a lot of discussion, so that our negotiators can have guidance, proper guidance, adequate guidance, and also we can help raise the momentum to scale up the net zero. Not only saying net zero, but also taking it onto the ground, take concrete actions for adaptation, concrete actions for delivering the support, and also technology transfer. Capacity building is essential, and also research, innovation is of paramount importance. We will all put all our hands on the deck, and that will help craft a new alliance, crack the hard nuts on our way to Glasgow, so that the road to Glasgow will be a silky one, not a kinky one. We don't want a kinky car. We want a Rashed effect in climate finance, quadrupling our effort. With that, I would now like to stop this conversation for today. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Wish you
Thank you.
all the best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
this year